After what felt like a lifetime, Sebastian and I emerged from the Undercroft, a little dazed, slightly breathless, and vaguely worried about missing dinner. The passage opened a crack just enough for me to slip through it. One glance toward the windows told me the sun was setting, flooding the corridor with deep red light. I stepped out and froze.
Hello, Sebastian.
Ominous. He stood directly in front of the entrance, wand in hand, as though he'd been about to enter. Or worse, waiting. I didn't dare breathe in case he might recognize me just by the sound of it. Maybe if I stayed perfectly still, I could pass for a shadow. Then Sebastian bumped straight into me.
Whoops, why are you...
He cut himself off, the warmth of his exhale brushing the back of my neck. I felt him tense.
Sebastian, who's with you?
Ominous asked. It wasn't really a question, more a hiss.
Is it Anne?
He knew it wasn't. Because why else would he look like a snake about to strike? Sebastian's gaze snapped to mine, his eyes wide and wordless. I turned to meet them with the same helpless stare. We agreed quickly. There was no escape, not from this. It's me, I said quietly.
Nina, what are you...
He faltered.
Why are you... Did you just come from the Undercroft?
The silence stretched unbearably. Then...
Did you show it to her?
His voice crashed through the corridor like a whip.
Sebastian, did you show her?
Ominous, please.
Sebastian began, jaw clenching, but his voice died as Ominous tilted his head, expression carved in stone.
Just because you've got a precious little crush on the new girl doesn't mean you get to parade around spilling my secrets. Our secrets.
His voice dropped lower, venomous.
You absolute rat.
Sebastian flinched, his hands curled into fists, knuckles white. He looked like he might snap back, like he always did. But something held him in place. Maybe the look on Ominous's face. Maybe guilt. This wasn't banter. Not a misunderstanding. This was about trust. About Ominous's family. And everything Sebastian had just jeopardized with a single act. I stood there counting heartbeats. 1, 2, 3. Then I broke. I'm so sorry, I whispered, voice thin, brittle as parchment. I turned and ran, down the corridor, away from the cabinet, away from them both, putting as much space as I could between myself and the friendship I'd just shattered. I swallowed against the lump in my throat as I pressed Harry against my collarbone, hoping to stifle the tightness within.
Oh dear, don't beat yourself up,
Anne said, flopping onto my bed with 2 plates piled high with food.
Sebastian should have known better. It's not your fault.
She'd accepted my excuse to skip dinner with a conspiratorial smirk, more than happy to smuggle catering into the dormitory. I wasn't particularly hungry, but the illicit comfort of garlic bread and Anne's company were a welcome distraction from the sting of Ominous calling me Sebastian's precious little crush. My chest ached every time the words replayed themselves, again and again, like a charm I couldn't shake. You've been spending your evening cheering me up after getting snapped at by Ominous, I said, managing a faint smile. Thank you, Anne. She cocked her head and gave a soft laugh.
No worries. If anyone knows how to survive those two, it's me.
I snorted, watching her fingers hover over the plate, deliberating on what to eat first.
Give them time, they'll sort things out,
she added, settling on a chicken leg.
And honestly, I wouldn't mind if you joined the Undercroft gang. Though Sebastian really has some nerve showing it to you just like that. I had to solemnly swear not to tell Nerida when they let me in. Not that I minded. Fewer people knowing is probably better.
He shouldn't have shown it to me, I muttered, dragging a piece of garlic bread across my plate before abandoning it again. Now that I've fallen in love with the place, it's going to be even harder not to go back.
Nonsense!
Anne cried, then choked as she launched a soggy crumb straight at my cheek.
You've seen it, so what? Once Ominous gets over it, we're going to have loads of fun.
For a moment, I thought about telling her, about the part that hurt the most, but I didn't know how to say it without sounding ridiculous. Instead, I just said, thanks, again, and let her chatter fill the space where my thoughts would have gone. Anne's ease clung to me as the next day unfolded like nothing had happened. For the next 2 days, I let myself orbit girls. It felt safer that way. The boys in my life had a talent for producing drama. Ominous ignored me completely, save for the one time I accidentally stepped in his path and earned a charming,
Watch where you're going!
Sebastian, meanwhile, kept sending me tortured looks across classrooms and corridors.
I'm working on it.
His eyes seemed to say. It didn't help. By the time Poppy invited me to do some beast sitting, I was halfway convinced I could bribe the sorting hat into reassessing my house. Maybe put me in Hufflepuff instead. She turned out to be the least exhausting person in the castle, requiring about as much social energy as a puffskein.
Professor Howen lets me feed them whenever I have the time.
Poppy said, tossing a clump of food toward the cluster of squeaks. I smiled and reached into the can again, aiming at Gerald. The smell was dreadful. Thank you for inviting me, I said, wiping my fingertips on a tuft of grass. This is surprisingly soothing.
I'm glad they have that effect on you too.
Poppy beamed. Her gaze lingered just a beat too long.
I noticed some tension involving Sallow and his gang. Are you okay?
Her question came too suddenly, too casual, too blunt. I choked on it for a second. Sebastian, I began, sifting through my thoughts, searching for a way to tell her without making the same mistake Sebastian did. He let me in on a secret, one that means a lot to Ominous. He found out, and now they're not speaking and it's my fault. I stopped myself before I could explain why it hurt so much, wincing at the memory, and waited. Another clump flew over the fence.
Merlin, that sounds stressful.
Poppy said mildly.
It took you barely a day to find new friends, and now you've stumbled into a years-long grudge match between two boys. That's frustrating, and somehow remarkable.
I almost laughed. She made it sound ridiculous and real. When I met her eyes, though, something behind the rich brown caught me off guard. Sorrow, maybe. Loneliness. Maybe because finding friends wasn't as easy as winning over a puffskeen's affection. I opened my mouth before I knew what to say. I was grateful to be interrupted.
Anyway,
Poppy said quickly, brushing grass off her robes.
Whenever people get too much, I come here. Feel free to pop by anytime.
I released a breath, the one I'd saved to speak sooner. Instead, I smiled, hoping she could hear the unspoken part. Thank you, Poppy. I'll definitely take you up on that. She'd won my affection long ago. Now she had my trust too. Defense against the dark arts felt like a waste of joy. Now that Sebastian and I were on the penalty bench, I couldn't muster much excitement for spell work. I missed the Undercroft, I missed Sebastian. But most of all, I missed Confringo. Ominous, to his credit, seemed fairly miserable too. He dropped into his transfiguration seat like it had betrayed him personally. By Thursday, we'd reached the extracurricular unit on transportation, a mixed bag of broom flying, flu familiarity, and a few terrifying teasers on apparition. The open air helped a little. The wind in my hair felt like it might blow the heaviness out of me, like I could strip the aching pressure off like a rain-drenched cloak. Imelda, however, former captain of the Slytherin Quidditch team, had no intention of letting me enjoy the moment in peace. She whizzed by in tight, showy spirals every time I caught her in my peripheral vision.
Hey, savior of the oppressed. Care for a race?
She called on her fifth pass. Leave me alone, Imelda. I'm not in the mood, I muttered without meeting her eyes.
Coward.
And she was right. I was. And I spent the rest of the class handing out Muggle candy bars to anyone not wearing green.